Okay, I suppose that if I were to ask you, as a student, to match these four colored lines with these four statements about the slope of those lines, I'm pretty confident that almost 100% of you would be able to match the orange line and the blue line correctly. But a smaller percentage would be able to confidently match the red line and the green line, the horizontal one and the vertical one correctly. And that is assuming that we all know what this symbol means. That's another lesson entirely. But um, confident that 100%, if I asked, is the slope of this line here positive, negative, 0, or undefined? 100% positive. And so, boom. Now, and if I asked the slope of the orange line, 100% of you would say it's a negative slope. But when we get to the horizontal line and the vertical line, that's where problems start to arise. And in another video, I rant a little bit about students having problems with the equation of a horizontal line or the equation of a vertical line. There's no need to have any problems because every point on this horizontal line has the same y coordinate, 5, 5, 5. So y equals 5 is the equation. That statement is what is true about every single point on that line. And x equals negative 2 is the statement of what is true about every point on that green vertical line. But let's talk about slope. Slope is, after all, I tell students that slope is probably the single most important mathematical concept you learn in high school. It's the basis of most of calculus. That is how important slope is. So if you don't completely and fundamentally understand slope, you're going to struggle with math throughout high school. And again, I implore you, do not try to memorize your way through math. Math is accomplished successfully through understanding. That way, when you encounter a new problem, if you understand it, if you understand the concepts that the problem is based on, you probably can figure out how to do this new problem. Don't complain to a teacher who's given a new problem on a test. That's a great teacher. That's a teacher who wants to know if you understand and is asking you to apply that understanding. If you've memorized how to do all the problems that the teacher's done for you, then of course you're not going to be able to do a problem that she hasn't done or he hasn't done because you haven't seen it before, so you haven't been able to memorize it. That's why understanding is important. All right, I'll step down from my soapbox for a second, or 3 or 4 more minutes for this video, and I want to try to explain why the slopes of these two horizontal and vertical line are what they are. Now we'll start with the horizontal line. So I'll choose my green pen. Oh, I said, well, since I chose green, I'll start with vertical. The slope of this green line is, the slope of any line is the change in y, or the rise, divided by the change in x, the run. Okay, as we move up and down, well, x isn't changing. So if x isn't changing, the change in x is 0. Y is changing, so the change in y, there is change. So what is something that doesn't equal 0 divided by 0? Well, in another video, I explain exactly why this ratio was undefined. But this ratio is undefined. In short, in case you haven't watched that other video, Um, anything divided by, when you divide in division, you're asking the question, how many zeros does it take to add up to this number up here? 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0, or you could look at it this way. How many zeros does it take to make that change in y that's not 0? Well, if this change in y doesn't equal 0, then it doesn't matter what I multiply 0 by. It doesn't matter how many zeros I take. I'm not going to add up to anything but 0, so I will never add up to that change in y. That's why 0 divided by 0 is undefined. I have a t-shirt that I ordered that says Chuck Norris can divide by 0. You can slam revolving doors too. But how about the vertical line now? The vertical line, you need to change to red. I called that line vertical, didn't I? That's a horizontal line. We just did the vertical line. The horizontal line, the slope, again, it's the change in y divided by the change in x. But the change in y, this time y isn't changing. Y is staying the same, so there is no change in y. But there is a change in x. So when you're dividing 0 by something that's not equal to 0, some students have trouble with that and confuse it with this one down here, but ask yourself, okay, how many delta x's does it take? What do I have to multiply that delta x by? How many of these guys does it take to add up to this guy? That's the question that division is asking. So what do I have to multiply this guy by to get this guy up here? The only thing I can multiply him by is 0. So the slope of a horizontal line is 0. Some students try desperately to memorize which one is which, but unless you come up with some really good mnemonic device, it shouldn't be difficult to memorize that. But my question is, why memorize something that's easy to understand? And you can't fully understand it unless you understand why delta y divided by 0 is undefined. And that would take a few more minutes to explain in detail, but I kind of explained it. I gave you the short version of it right here. How many zeros does it take to add up to that non-zero delta y? It doesn't matter how many zeros you add together. You won't ever get to anything other than 0. So that ratio is undefined. So I hope that helps understand why a horizontal line's slope is 0 and a vertical line has a slope that is undefined. It has to do with which of these two changes is 0. Is x changing? And which one's not changing? Because in a horizontal line, y is not changing. In a vertical line, x is not changing. And that's the explanation.